security, and generational impact. Who doesn't want to leave a legacy for their children and their children's children, as the Word of God has instructed us to do? I don't know about you, but that's what I want to do. Not just in 2026, but for decades to come. Set them up to win and live an amazing life. So today we're talking about protect your human life value. That's powerful. I felt that in my shana now when I read that. I was like, that's our topic? Let's go. So give it up for my friend. He is definitely a mentor, one of the greatest wealth strategists I know, the great Jeff Kamke. Take it away, sir.
Well, good morning, Linda. Great to be with you guys as always. I can't believe a whole nother month has gone by. But yes, we are here to talk about protecting your human life value. So it's interesting, when you think about human life value, I never had heard that term before I got into doing what I'm doing now. And, as I look back over my life and, all those Sunday sermons in church, it's like, wow, we actually do have a human life value. God created us special. He created us to carry out a specific thing into this world, right? To shine our light amongst other people. And there is a massive value to that. And oftentimes as we get, to be an adult and we go through life and we have stressors and we have the things in life show up, we forget sometimes about our human life value and how powerful we are as a being that God created us to be, to share with other people a message of hope, of inspiration, of expansion, to become better versions of ourselves and to elevate in holiness. That's really what we're here to do. And that value, as we shift from more of a spiritual conversation into a monetary conversation, there is an actual monetary value that we have. Now, we all have a different one, right? We all don't have the same value basically, because we all have different skills, abilities. God created us to do certain things that might differ from somebody else. And God might have not planted a large income on your heart or blessed you with a lot of that. Now, there's others of us that we are still awakening to that calling to maybe raise our financial abundance in our life and be able to bless other people with that. I love the inspirational YouTube channels and things where you'll see somebody out and, they'll ask. I was watching one the other day. There was a young guy. He's like, how much is your biggest tip? He was asking the waitress, and she's like, oh, about $150. And he's like, I'm going to give you a $500 tip, and she just breaks down in tears. And you see the people that are helping, homeless pay rent and do wonderful things. And that's just a microcosm of the things that you can do. And obviously they're doing that for some clicks and views on YouTube. But the general message is sometimes we're living below our human life value and we're not stepping fullness into the greatness God calls us to do. So not only is part of my message when I come on here every month to share with you principles and processes and strategies around what we can do with our money, but it's to take a bird's eye view and zoom out from even that and look at our calling and what inner work do we need to do? How do we need to develop and cultivate our human life value so that we're stepping into the greatness that God calls us to be? Because it's sometimes easy to play below our ceiling and play small and let the fears and the doubts and the insecurities limit us in our life. So it's a message of let's expand. Let's be all that we can be, all that God calls us to be. And then as we do that, looking to make sure, are we protecting that human life value for our family, for the purpose God calls us to be a part of? Because if we start looking at how much do I make every single year, how much can I make, right? That's the big question with human life value. What is my potential to earn? If I tapped into 10% of my potential to earn, if I tapped into 50% of that potential to earn money, am I at 100%? I doubt any of us are at 100%. Right? We're not at the level of Jesus or God, right? Where we're perfect. So the idea is that we have room to grow, room to expand. So when we bring that to a mathematical calculation, how much are we able to make? How much can we make if we continue to learn and be educated and take the right kind of action and be around the right kind of people and spreading the word and speaking up about the things that we love and the experiences that we've had that have changed our lives, doing that with other people to impact them. And usually by a byproduct of doing those things, our income can go up, right? In longevity, if you're sharing the message of the 90 for life message and Tangy Tangerine and the Super Greens and all the different wonderful products, and benefiting other people's lives because you're speaking up, because you're sharing the message, you're spreading your light to other people, that's going to have a positive impact on your bank account, the amount of money flowing into your life, and that's going to be a reflection back into your human life value as you continue to elevate your income and your net worth and your overall wealth, abilities. That is a calculation that we're going to look at today. And how do we protect that, right? Because I believe that God calls us to greatness. And as we step more and more into that, we also have a greater responsibility, not only to protect what we are creating and how that affects our family, but also our community and the people that we touch, our sphere of influence. We have a responsibility to protect that and make sure that what we start, what we create, can carry on after we do. We can have plans and strategies in place that can make sure that what we have been called to do is something that lives beyond our time, right? And that there's structures and strategies. We can do a lot of that through educational processes, through YouTube channels, through content creation, through money, right? We can let wealth be something that impacts other people beyond our timeline. Look, I was recently at a library to do some continuing education credits for my insurance licenses, right? We have to do that every 2 years. You have to get a certain number of CEs. And I was thinking about that as I was there. It's like, wow, it's a Carnegie library. And the Carnegie family was a super wealthy family that they now are able to maintain all these libraries all across the country through the wealth that they created. Now, was there a Carnegie sitting at the front desk when I walked in? No. Wasn't a relative, right? It was just somebody locally that was hired there. But the idea that they had to put something in place in a massive scale to benefit children, to learn, to have a place to go and study, to meet up with like-minded people and hold meetings and do different things for the community, is living beyond that legacy, right? It's a perpetuating legacy that lives beyond the timeline of the person that started it. I don't even know is it Andrew Carnegie that I think is the one that started it. He's been long gone, but that lives beyond him because he put systems and structures in place, not just knowledge, not just experience, not just education, but a financial blueprint that allows something bigger than himself to carry on for generations after he was alive. That is the message of protecting human life value. It is so very powerful. So today I want to jump into this, and no matter if you're at, in kindergarten and preschool level with this discussion, or you're in high school level, or you're at PhD level with this human life value, I'm going to be able to speak to wherever you're at, and let's see where we can elevate our thinking and put in some practical, simple beginning steps to make sure that you're protecting your human life value. So let me do a share screen real quick, and I'm going to jump into the slides I have to share with you wonderful people today. So are you guys able to see that? Yep, there we go. Okay. Cool. So let me get on to the lovely disclaimer here, and we'll jump through. So my name is Jeff Kamke. If you're new to the Daily Dose, when I've been on before, I see a lot of familiar faces, but I never know when some new folks hop on. So I'm a wealth strategist and financial practitioner, so a little bit different perspective than a traditional financial advisor that you're used to hearing. A lot of same thought processes, but we bring in how our values and our beliefs and our inner development coincide with what we do with money. And we use all products and tools in the financial world to help people elevate their financial lives. So this presentation is not specific to taxes, to legal advice or financial advice. None of that is what we're talking about today. So this is basically for educational purposes only. We're not going to be soliciting to invest or anything of that nature. But what we do is help people align their money with their values, their beliefs, their vision, and so that they're using money as a tool to expand what they're here to do in this world, what God calls them to do. So that's what we're going to talk about today, is how do we integrate that into our life, right? And make sure that we're protecting our human life value, not just from the viewpoint in how we see ourselves today, but who we are going to grow into as time goes on. As we continue to develop and grow that human life value, we need to be thinking and having a plan and strategy in place to continually protect how that impacts our family and the earning potential, because there's a thing, and we've talked about this at some point in the last 3 years on here, of Parkinson's law, of how as our income goes up, we tend to increase our spending. It's a natural human process. And so as we continue to earn more money, we usually have maybe a little bit bigger home, or maybe some nicer cars, or there's more assets that we own and control, that if we lose those things, it can have a burden on our family, right? And as our community grows and as we have a bigger downline, right? Think about if you had a downline of 2 people. What is the impact of that if you were to go away? Maybe not as important, right? You're only kind of, mentoring 2 people. What if you had a downline of 2,000 people and you were to go away and you had no plan in place to perpetuate anything that you've learned up until that point? You just vanished one day. You were gone. You were with Jesus, no longer here. And those 2,000 people didn't have you as a strategy or a process to continue to learn and to continue to grow from what you've started, right? That's part of protecting your human life value. And there's that financial component that is built into that of how you can, make that work. So what I want to start with today is talking about protecting your human life value. And how we do this is through a product called life insurance. You guys have probably heard about life insurance. I talk about life insurance a lot when I'm on here. Haven't so much lately because I've been talking a little bit more about the inner growth and development, but I want to get back on that wavelength because it is so vital to be able to protect our human life value with the most efficient way to do that, which is through life insurance. And I want to talk about the alignment of life insurance with our values and beliefs, because as well, a lot of people on here, I'm sure you're more of a forward-thinking person, a growth-oriented person. Occasionally I'm able to tune in to other speakers throughout the week on here, and I'm always hearing a similar message, right, of growth and expansion and serving people and abundance. Those are the messages that Linda has wonderful speakers on here sharing on an every single day basis to help elevate you guys. And so we want to take a look at what we're doing to protect our human life value, and any of our financial strategies. Are they in alignment with who we are right now and where we're going? Because I often find people are doing things with their money and having the systems and tools and strategies that they're using their money, whether it's mutual funds, 401ks, life insurance, all these different things, are a lot of times they've never checked into themselves. And is this in alignment with me? It might be in alignment with Dave Ramsey. It might be in alignment with Grant Cardone. It might be in alignment with this guru, or what my brother-in-law taught me, or what my parents taught me. But is it congruent with who you are and who is God calling you to be? That may be yes, it may be no, but I invite you to ask yourself that question. Is what you're doing in alignment with that? So I have a thing, this kind of came to me as I was preparing for this. I'm going to call it the hierarchy of life insurance consciousness, right? Not to get too woo-woo with you guys, but there's going to be a lot of value that you see in this, and you're going to be able to find where you're at on this list and go, I see how maybe I'm thinking small and how I can elevate my thinking around protecting my human life value, right? So let's jump into this. This is the hierarchy of human life value. So when I'm talking with people and they're like, oh yeah, life insurance. Yep, I get what that is. That covers my funeral costs. Like, that's not wrong. You are absolutely right. That is one of the aspects that life insurance can do, is burial coverage. It allows you to be able to not put a burden on your family members. For when you pass, you have your funeral expenses covered and you're good, right? Nothing beyond that. That's the basics. That's kind of ground floor, elementary level 1, right? Beyond that, life insurance, I hear this kind of second most common. Oh, it's to pay off some debts, pay off the house, right? A lot of times there's mortgage protection insurance, which is basically term insurance that you have, that if you have a 30-year mortgage, you have a 30-year term policy to go along with that, so that if you were ever to pass away and your human life value, your ability to earn money goes away, your family has a mechanism to pay off the house, so that you're not putting your wife or husband in a position where they have to sell the house or foreclose on the house if there's not enough finances to handle that. So you're making sure you're taking care of your family in that way, which is an amazing thing. It's not wrong. It's not all that it can be, though, right? This is just second layer of thinking, right? So you can kind of see how the level of thinking is increasing, right? Just funeral costs, and then, pay off some debts, make sure the house is secure, right? That's building on itself. The next thing would be cover a year or two of income until the money's gone, right? I hear that very common when I'm talking with clients, is like, I want a life insurance policy. I've got one maybe through my employer. It's a $200,000 death benefit. And it's like, great. Have you ever thought about how long that's going to last you, right? Based on how much you make per year. And they're like, oh yeah, that'll be a couple years of income. Great. That means for a year or two, your income is covered. If you want to take some time off, whatever, that's perfect. That's awesome. And you can see that's like a little higher level of thinking about how you can, use life insurance as a tool to elevate your situation and improve things during a really traumatic, time when you lose a loved one, right? The next layer of that is more about, let me move my screen here. I've got a couple things covering the window here. There we go. The next layer is covering many years of income. So you have time to grieve and maybe start anew, right? I've had a few instances in my family where my father-in-law passed about 6 years ago. My father passed a little over 2 years ago. And I've been able to compare and contrast my family versus my in-laws. That my in-laws, he did have a work life insurance policy. My mother-in-law was actually able to sell the house that they've been in for 30 years. And she's now at a lake house, right? She was able to start anew, kind of start fresh as life looked different without her husband, right? And so that can be one of the ways that we can be planning ahead to protect our human life value and improve the situation of the family that we leave behind, right? Being able to do that. The next level beyond that is putting the death benefit to work, spinning off income for the family, right? This is a little bit even higher level thinking of, wait a minute, I could take a death benefit and make that be kind of like a personal pension, or, where I'm living off the interest of that. Like I could have enough death benefit that I could basically never have to work again. I could elevate my family's situation to a point where it would completely change the paradigm. They wouldn't have to work. They are set free financially. All their living and lifestyle expenses are covered because I put this death benefit in place that now spins off income that I don't need to work. That's more of a wealth principle, right? Where you're putting your money to work. Your money is working for you, where you're no longer in a position where you need to trade your time for money. You still may want to, you still may do that, but you don't need to. It's more of a God thing. You can serve from the heart without the attachment to needing to make income, right? It can be disconnected. You've got your income coming in, everything's covered. I can serve people in any way that I want that feels good to me or that God's calling me to do. And I don't have to worry about the money part of it. It's already covered. So it's another higher level of thinking, right? And the last level, this is what, Linda, when I first met you a few years ago, you talked about this as you were emceeing the event that I was at, talking about what would the Rockefellers do. So those of you that have been a part of Linda's groups for a while, and you've been doing the book readings, and you were part of that book reading at the time a few years ago, or have read it since, this is a whole nother level of wealth consciousness that wealthy families put in place, life insurance, so that they can become the family bank, right? All financial decisions and all financial moves flow through the family bank. And they're not just handing out money. There's a process and a structure and framework that they use, but it's a way to no longer have the family paying interest costs to Chase and Wells Fargo and Capital One for the car loans and the mortgages. It's a way to elevate the flow of money. And there's a whole science that goes into this, but just to give you a sprinkle and a little dusting of what this looks like and how it's different than way at the bottom of the list of just covering funeral costs, right? It's a totally different mindset, whole different framework of being of, wait a minute, I could totally transform the next generations as they come in and need their first house, need their first car, and setting them up for financial success and not being a slave to the bank and not paying out hundreds of thousands of dollars in interest costs. Because when I buy that car after 5 years, I've paid a lot of times 30% interest, or the volume of all the interest payments. Even though it's a 6% note, you've probably paid around 20-30% interest on that vehicle. When you buy a home, a lot of people don't do the math and realize I bought this $200,000 house. After my mortgage is up, I've probably paid $300,000, $400,000, or $500,000 to the bank, depending on the length of the mortgage and the interest rate, right? You've paid double for the house. You don't even realize it, but that's a couple $100,000 that you will never see again just to be able to live in the home. It's not good or bad. It's just an education and awareness to realize maybe there's a better way that we could do things with our money. And this is a way of protecting our human life value, that you can put these things in place if you're at that place to where it makes sense to implement these. Obviously, some of you are more down at the bottom 2 or 3 or 4. You're not at this top level, but it's something to start thinking towards, building towards, as God's maybe calling you to continue to grow and expand and serve more people, and your longevity business takes off. And if you're doing other businesses as well, as your personal wealth begins to grow, it opens up the opportunity to do strategies like this that are more at the top of the list. And that can be exciting, right? To be able to think bigger and think about, how can I change my children and grandchildren's lives and my great-grandchildren's lives because of how I protected my human life value. I took care of my family, but I was forward thinking enough. And I know, Linda, you've talked about this at different times when I've been on, that we are called to protect and serve the future generations and put plans in place so that they can thrive, not just survive, right? It's something that is a great responsibility that we are given. So with those areas, right, I think you guys have probably sensed a theme, right? As we started out the bottom covering funeral costs, and we get all the way to the top of being a family bank, which might be a brand new concept for some of you. I've talked about this on here before, but not so much recently. What's the common theme? Did any of you notice a common theme with this that you might go, oh, as you go up this list, the people that are implementing that different level of thought process and use of the death benefit, those people's net worths are higher. Their wealth is higher, right? The wealthiest families use the very top principle, the family bank. Usually people that don't have as much income and maybe haven't had a whole lot of extra money in their lifetime are mainly just looking to cover funeral costs. And it's not bad. It's not a judgment thing. It's where we're at. And this is just a way to go, wait a minute, where I'm at, I'm not totally in love with where I'm at. I want to elevate my situation. I want to elevate my finances. I want to elevate how I show up and serve the community and my people in the sphere of my influence. Maybe I need to think differently and have different strategies and use the tool of life insurance in an elevated way so that I can do more with protecting my human life value to impact other people, right? And so as you begin to go up this list, you can go, oh, I can see if I went from just covering funeral costs to being able to pay off my debt. That's a big leap for some of us to be able to go to that level of thinking. For others of you, it might be more, higher up, right? You've maybe got a couple years of income covered by your current death benefit, but you're like, I would really like to be able to put that money to work for my family so they don't have to work again. It's an up leveling and kind of a changing of how you approach what you do and the structures you have with your finances and how you use life insurance. So it's this elevation process. So again, there's no right and wrong with any of this and where you're at. It's just an acknowledgement of, if I'm where I'm at, do I like where I'm at? Do I want to elevate it? Is God calling me for more greatness? And if he is, these are just some steps to start taking in your thinking, right? So how do we start doing this? We're talking about this. You guys get the idea of, using life insurance and having it be aligned with our values, our beliefs, what God's calling us to do in our life. So where does this go? So we can start at the basics. A lot of times I talk about whole life insurance, but let's talk about step one for a lot of people. It's term life insurance. And there's some things that when I got into the industry, I didn't even know about with term life insurance, but I've learned in the last few years. And it's some things that are very good for you guys to be aware of what's out there. And if you already have term insurance, you might go, oh, I want to add maybe a little bit better type of term insurance to what I'm already doing and amplify that. And Jeff, I love what you're talking about. I resonate with elevating my life insurance consciousness and using these tools to protect more of my human life value. Maybe I want to, do things a little bit differently. Maybe the way that I set my policy up was an older version of me that thought a different way. And now that I'm at this place I'm at now, I see things differently. And I want to have the life insurance that supports where I'm at now and where I'm going. And what I have in place right now doesn't necessarily do that as well. So there's really three categories of term life. There's the cheap term that you hear the ads on TV. Oh, it's just $19 a month. Come and get your $1 million policy. There's a bunch of those out there. Usually that's the most amount of death benefit for the least amount of premium. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a tool. It works great for the people that need that product and at that stage of life. It's amazing, right? You can get the protection and it's not like a big drag on your finances, on your cash flow and your budget. The second category is something called living benefits term. I'm going to jump into a story when I get into a little bit more details about this in a few minutes. And the third one is convertible term. And this isn't like, I think one of the times that Jeff Finley and I were on here, we had a silly graphic of a term policy driving a convertible car. But this is the ability to go from term policy into a whole life policy. There's actually conversions that you can do. And I didn't know any of this stuff years ago. And honestly, a lot of the agents in the industry and a lot of the financial practitioners like what I do don't know about these either. They're very little known tools that can be really good. So let's talk about, when do we use these? What's the benefits? When would you think about implementing these into your strategy to protect your human life value? And and really minimize risks that we can have when we're going through life and having health conditions arise, or we want to expand in certain areas where we store our money and protect ourselves in different ways. There's different ways to use these tools. So I'm just going to give you a few high points here, nothing too in depth, but let's dig into a little bit about the cheap term policy. So the best uses are when resources are low. I was thinking about this. I didn't put the picture in here, but a couple months ago, I was at my nephew's wedding. Him and his wife recently just got married, and they're in their early 20s. I think he's 22, something like that. I forget exactly how old he is. I still see him as like 10 or 12, right? But he's actually 22, and they've got a baby, and they're married, and the whole bit. I was thinking about it. I haven't had this discussion with him yet, but is he protecting his human life value? He's now a provider of not only a wife, but a young little baby girl, beautiful baby girl. So obviously he's not making oodles of money. There's not money being dropped off at his doorstep with, filled briefcases of money, right? Budget's a little low. They're just starting out. But that's where cheap term comes in. It's a great way for them to get covered, for him to make sure that if anything were to ever happen to him, being the sole provider of his wife and baby girl, that he's protecting his human life value, protecting his wife, protecting his baby, and the needs that would come if he weren't here, right? To provide for income. So that's obviously one of the lowest hanging fruits. Sometimes, and I already mentioned this, if you have a mortgage and you need to make sure that, wow, if I stop working, my spouse might not be able to afford the home. So let's have a cheaper term policy in place so that if something ever happened to me, the death benefit would come in, pay off the mortgage. My spouse owns the house free and clear. And that's a major burden off their plate. There's equity. It's an asset that generally appreciates. So that puts them in a prime financial position, especially if you're following like Dave Ramsey principles. Your home paid off is a major milestone in your financial process, right? And then the third one really is, if you're young and just starting out and you haven't gotten into your career and cash flow is not there, but to start the protection now so you have it. And then as your income grows, you can always, change the strategy down the way. Now, there is some negatives with cheap term, and I do see this more frequent than I would like to admit, just because it's the nature of it, is the cheap term policy is very cheap in the beginning because usually we're the youngest we're going to be. And the older we get, the more costly the life insurance becomes. So it becomes really good when you're young, but then the older you get, it becomes a little more of a challenge, because if you've got a 10 or 20-year term policy, by the time that policy is up, usually the new premium, if you were to keep that policy, the premium would jump a multiple. My personal policy that my wife and I took out when we were married was a 10-year term. This was before I got into all this and really knew what I was doing. My dad actually signed us up for it. And when it went from year 10 to a year 11, our premium went from, I think, $29.15 a month to $96 a month, right? That's a 4x multiple of where that's going. And every year it continues to go up. And there's a point with term policies, if you look at the illustration, that the annual premium will start to exceed the death benefit, which is kind of crazy. But that's where term insurance can have a little bit of a negative, right? We can't afford it. You lose the coverage because it got outside of that initial term and the price jumped through the roof. And that's something that I don't hear the Dave Ramsey's talk a whole lot about. They tend to plan more from everything going right and not worst case scenario. I'm going to touch on that at the end. So typically one of the negatives with cheap term is it's great when you're young, but the older you get, when I talk to clients that are in their 50s and 60s and they haven't been able to build their portfolio, they don't have a ton of money like they thought they would. There was job changes and illnesses and divorces and life happened to these people. They don't have that self-insurance because they haven't been able to put enough money away, haven't been able to take advantage of compounding interest, and they need insurance and they literally can't afford it. And maybe their health is deteriorated where they can't qualify for it anymore because they don't have good health anymore. So that puts people in a really big bind that breaks my heart when there's nothing I can do for them. But that's just something to be educated about. It's not necessarily a reason to not do term. It's just you need to know that and have a strategy for how you're going to navigate that moving forward, right? So the next type is living benefits term. So the best uses are get you access to your death benefit early. So what that means is when you take out a life insurance policy, we think of, we call it death or life insurance, but it's really death insurance, right? But there's actually a living component to it that we can access the death benefit before we die if we have chronic, critical, or terminal illnesses. So I think I've shared this with you before. The owner of the insurance agency, Life 180, that I'm at, I've spent some time with the owner down in the Dominican Republic a few times. It's a masterminds with a small intimate group, and he shared the story where his father-in-law, November of 2020, was diagnosed. I think it was either stage 3 or stage 4 pancreatic cancer. Now, I know enough of you on here are savvy enough with health and wellness to know that's not a good diagnosis to have, right? That's literally a death sentence. You're not going to be here very long. He had a living benefits term policy with several $100,000 that he was then able to access. And instead of going the conventional medical route, chemo, radiation, and surgery, which doesn't have a great track record, they were able to take a portion of that death benefit up front. They went and sought the world's top people. Some of them were in Arizona. I think they even went to Mexico. I met the father-in-law last August at an event. He's still alive. He's still thriving. He still, quote unquote, has pancreatic cancer, but it has not advanced. It has not taken his life yet. He still plays golf multiple times a week, and he's in his mid-80s. And I was able to sit next to him at the table at an event last August. And with my own eyes and ears, it's not just a theory, a story that I've heard. Like, I've actually talked to the gentleman, and it's amazing use of living benefits of our death benefit, that we're not told that this benefit exists, and how that we can basically have more control over our medical directive, right? We're not forced into what the insurance company says they will provide. It gives us a financial option and control to go do things with our health that resonates with us. Maybe we're not wanting to go the traditional route, conventional route. We want to implement alternative therapies that have a higher probability of fixing the root cause, allowing our body to heal, right? So that we can actually continue to be alive and not just exist, but actually still, live out our life. So that's a powerful way. Now, there is a slight increase in premiums for this extra benefit, usually about 20 to 30%. But anybody that I talk to, they're like, I'd love to pay 20 to 30% more than the cheap term if I have that ability to have more control over if I ever have a chronic, critical, or terminal illness. It gives me the ability to go and do what I want to for my care that resonates with me. That's powerful, right? For those of you, I know many of you, if not all of you on this call, resonate with alternative medicine to some degree. So that is a powerful strategy of protecting your human life value, but also protecting your health and giving you some financial options that you might not have that can, maintain the level of care that you want to have around your health. The third type is convertible term. So this is a great way that if you're kind of like in the cheap term category, like I really can't afford something that's maybe more robust, a whole life policy or any of the permanent policies out there, the premiums are just outside of my cash flow. This is the ability to lock in your insurability. So when you're young, your insurance costs are the lowest. So if you can buy a policy and get your foot in the door when you're young and lock in your insurability while your health is good, that keeps your premiums low for the rest of your life, but it gives you the ability to get started, today or soon, and then upgrade to whole life later and start taking advantages of the benefits of whole life, which I'll probably touch on in the next few months, talk about that again. It allows you to then get started and have that in place for the rest of your life. And when you do convert from the term portion of it over to whole life, and you can usually convert portions, you don't have to convert all, so there's a lot of flexibility within that. You can skip underwriting though. You don't have to go through underwriting again as you're older and maybe your health isn't quite as good. So there's very big advantages to putting convertible term in place when you're young or when it makes sense, so that you can take advantage of that, as your income goes up, as your wealth increases, and you have the ability to have a more robust whole life policy that's going to do a lot more things for you than just the term, but at least you're protecting your human life value, which is the key thing. So here's a couple of thoughts that I commonly hear these, and I want to put these in here because it's important to have this perspective of, when I talk to people about life insurance and protecting your human life value, most people are like, it's not that big a deal. It won't be that bad if somebody passes, or, if I pass or my spouse passes. Like, they blow it off because they probably never experienced it. I know many of you on here have experienced it multiple times. I know, Linda, you've experienced it multiple times in the time I've known you. Going through it twice with my father-in-law, my father, like, it's a big deal. It's a big, big deal. And there's so many aspects of losing a family member. And this is, I'm not talking about losing a spouse. I've never lost a spouse. That is going to be the biggest, most traumatic thing you can do. And that's what this is protecting you with, is the spouse generally is the one passing. That is such a huge thing. There are so many aspects that come up. that you just aren't going to be prepared for. There's no book you can read, no seminar you can go to that's going to prepare you for what life is going to look like, the grieving process, the trauma, the emotions day to day, the memories that key in, all that stuff that is going to be way bigger than you think it's going to be when you go through it. So this is the common thing that I see. And I generally support Dave Ramsey up into a point. This is a point that I have a little conflict with Dave on, because most of his advice, and there's other gurus out there as well, that say buy term, invest the difference, which isn't a bad strategy. But again, it's kind of like that hierarchy that we talked about with life insurance, death benefit consciousness. How are you using it? A lot of planning out there is planning for best case scenario. You're going to have a great job. You're going to be able to put all this money away into the market. The markets are going to do great every year. They're going to average 10% every single year. And by the time you get to retirement, you're going to have multiple millions of dollars. You're going to be self-insured, and that cheap term policy you won't need anymore because you've got millions of dollars that are going to protect you and your family. That's planning for best case scenario, because you're planning that your working years are going to be without interruption. You're going to be able to invest a lot of money. You won't need that money for living and lifestyle. You're counting that the markets are going to do phenomenal for a 20 or 30 year span of time, which is kind of a stretch, right? It's all if everything goes really well. Well, we want to insure for worst case scenario. We want to plan for best case scenario, or hope for best case and plan for worst case. So we want to see, like, okay, what if my income doesn't go up that much? What if I'm not able to invest? What if the markets crash 2 times during my working years and I don't have millions of dollars in retirement? Because I put the external workings of a market and companies that I don't own and control, and I don't sit in the board meetings to make my financial future possible, to make my retirement great, right? You've basically given that control over to something that's external from you. It's not bad, but you need to be aware that that's what's going on. So there's a lot of risk in all of that. So we want to make sure we're insured for, if that all doesn't go great, what position am I going to be in? Am I still going to be okay? Because we don't want to get rid of the term insurance thinking things are going to be great when they don't end up being that way. And I talk to more people than I like to admit as well that aren't in a great place. They only have $100,000 and they're 62 years old, and that's not enough to retire on. So that's something to be considering as you're thinking about, protecting your human life value. When you're thinking about death benefit, we talked about this early on as I went through that hierarchy. You're probably going to want more than you need. Most people are underinsured when it comes to death benefit because they see it from, oh, it's just the 20 grand I need for burial. Oh, it's just, I only make 50 grand a year, so I only need like a $50,000 or $100,000 death benefit. It's not that big a deal. But there's a few things that you underestimate, right? Inflation. Think about what costs have gone up in the last 5 or so years. If we were to talk, in 2018 or 2019 about how much death benefit you need versus today, you'd be like, oh, I need way more death benefit because things have cost sometimes 50% more. Vehicles, groceries. I cry every time I go get groceries. You go to the grocery store and you just pick up the few things you need for like the next day or two, just in a quick trip. You're like, that's $100. Like, what the heck? That was 40 a few years ago. What the heck? So those are things that happen, right? And we don't, and I've already established this, we underestimate the loss of what the impact of losing someone does to us. So those are a couple things to keep in mind. The last one is just planning for a longer term policy. And this is because we're planning for worst case. If worst case happened, we'd want a term policy that went longer. So if you're thinking about a 10-year, you might think about a 15 or a 20, just so you're protecting your human life value for a little bit longer than you think, not thinking everything is going to go perfect, but thinking if they don't, I want protection for a little bit longer. I'd rather have it. I can always cancel it if I really don't need it. If I really got millions in the bank and I don't need that $19 a month term policy, I can get rid of that sucker. But if it doesn't go all great, you're still protected because you had forward thinking going, let's not just jump ahead. Let's not put the cart before the horse. Let's just, plan and be, good stewards of, what we're wanting to protect our family with. So a few things to think about. The idea of, do I have enough coverage, right? These are some things that a lot of families don't think about is if you have kids and the spouse dies and now you need to go back to work, who's managing the kids? If you got 2 or 3 kids, how much is daycare? Daycare isn't $10 a day. It's a lot of money. So where's that money coming from? If you now need to pay for the house, pay for the car, pay for the insurance, pay for the gas, pay for the groceries, right? It's a bigger expense a lot of people don't think about. What if the family needs therapy for a year or two to work through the trauma of losing a mom or a dad or a grandpa or a grandma? Like, that's a big deal. That can be a lot of money. I know when I work with anybody in that realm, you're talking $100 a pop easy. Every appointment's $100 or more. We talked about paying off debt, paying off mortgages. So, I talk to people that they owe $300,000 on their house and they have a $100,000 death benefit in their life insurance policy. And I'm like, I'm not great at math, but I don't think that's enough to cover the mortgage. Like, you're going to be upside down. Do you realize that? And people are like, oh, I never thought about that. So it's something to consider, right? And both my mother-in-law and my mom still lives in the house I grew up in. But the idea of relocating and moving somewhere new, being in a fresh environment as life looks totally different after you lose a loved one or a spouse, sometimes makes a lot of sense to do that. So what's the cost of those things? And just being able to take time off. Those are all considerations that you want to put a mathematical calculation to and do the math. What would this look like? And then how much death benefit do I want to, make sure I'm covered in those types of things in a real life scenario, not just looking at, well, I make 50 grand a year, so I need to cover that for a year or two. This is what a funeral costs. I need to cover that. Obviously, think about those things, but think beyond those things when you're planning for how much death benefit do I have or how much do I need. So if you have a term policy, you have any type of insurance and you want, just some thoughts on, wow, I've never thought about, does what I have right now align with the things that I've learned today? Do they align with who I am today, where I'm going today, where God calls me to be tomorrow? Do I need, to look at this from a different perspective? And maybe there's tools out there like convertible term or the different term policies we talked about, living benefits term. Maybe I want to add those into what I've already got. Or maybe what I've got is maybe I'm a year or two away from the term expiring and maybe I'm going to have a 3 or 4x jump in my premium. Maybe we can extend coverage for maybe about what you're paying right now. That does happen more often than you think. So if you need any of those things, hit me up. I'll put some contact info at the end of this. If you want an extra set of eyes and a different perspective on what you've already got, maybe it's a thumbs up, you're doing great, you've got what you need. Maybe it's, hey, let's consider some other options, right? Based on what we learned today. So I'm available for those things as always to share value with you guys on that way. I've talked about this the last 2 months I've been on. I'm going to be in Tempe, Arizona here in 2 weeks at this event, and I still have some free tickets. I'd love if any of you want a last minute, like, I wasn't planning to do this, but this sounds amazing. I'm going to hop on a plane or drive there and meet you in person, Jeff, and I'm going to learn from my mentor, Chris, and a bunch of other people. Garrett Gunderson's going to be there. Caleb Williams is going to be there. There's some amazing teachers and trainers that are going to be there talking about the transformational process that we can go through to elevate our financial situation. So this is I think most of the first day is going to be talking about inner work and our growth and expansion, and then followed by a ton of financial information, what I'm talking about and beyond, real estate, life insurance, tons of different financial strategies. So if you want to go, I'll put some information up here on the next slide, but if you want to check out the event and learn more about it, you can go to events.life180.com, and then you can learn a little bit about what's going to be there. And if it resonates and you want to go, you can certainly message me. So these are just a few of the things that he's going to talk about: the 5 pillars of cash flow hacking, the personal growth and expansion, talking about debt management. I talked about this a couple months ago. I know I really struck a chord with a few of you that were on talking about debt. I've had a couple follow-up calls with a few of you about that. Savings optimization, how to become more efficient with where we put our money and how we store our money and how we use our savings. Investor DNA, are we in alignment with how we invest? And then thinking big, right? Thinking legacy and estate planning and allowing what we create in our lifetime that God's called us to do and be to live on beyond us and impact the people that are going to come after us, our family and sphere of influence. So April 29th through May 2nd, Tempe, Arizona. The main sessions start the morning of the 30th, registrations in the evening on the 29th. If you want any of this info, you want to talk about it, or the registration code to get it for free, it might actually be $1. I think it's free though. I'll put this in the chat, but I put my phone number here and my email. You can text me, call me, email me if you want to come. I'd love to have you there to join me. I'm going to have at least one of my agents is going to be there, and I've got a few other people who are hopefully going to be coming as well. And just going to be a great way to be around like-minded people. There's going to be health and wellness products, I believe, there, so it might be a good marketing opportunity for you to share what you know with longevity products as well there. So with that, if you want to know anything more about what I'm doing, wealthenergetics.money is my website. QR code here if you want to scan that, and it'll take you right to my page, and you can learn a little bit more about what I do. I've got a YouTube channel, plenty of content on there as well. So with that, I feel like I've talked a ton. Hopefully this has impacted you guys, shifted your thinking a little bit, got you thinking about some new things that maybe you hadn't considered before. And with that, I appreciate the time, Linda. I always love being on here and sharing these principles with your audience. I love your audience, and I'll open it back up to you for any questions that any of you might have.
Thank you so much, Jeff. That was powerful. First of all, your haircut, I like the face, what you've done with your amazing.
Thank you, thank you.
And let me tell you something. You need to download, this is the best video that I've heard from you on life insurance. It was so well explained. You need to download this, put this on your website. It is one of the best that I've heard, from you and even Jeff, the other Jeff. Sometimes it can be convoluted with so much information that it can be complicated.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing. It was great. You need to download this, send it to some people. This was definitely just one of the best that I've heard you do. Incredible.
Thank you.
Incredible. So thank you so very much. Does anyone have any questions? I think you go to Wealth Energetics. Is it .me? What is it?
.money.
.money. Yeah.
Yep.
Wealthenergetics.money. If you need to talk to him. You need to get this information for your family. I know many of us, my pastor, who came from the heart of the hood, he was the first millionaire in his family by a life insurance policy. That's how he made his first million. Now he makes millions all the time, but sometimes you need to get over that threshold. And guess what? Life insurance is a sure way to kind of push you over or even get you to the $500,000 mark very, very quickly because it gains value so quickly. So, Dr. Jim.
Good morning, Linda. Thank you,
Good
Jeff.
morning,
I just want to reiterate what Linda said, that this was an excellent talk. I thought you did it in such a way that it built upon itself. It was not confusing, and we know that complexity confuses the mind, and so you simplified it in such a way that it just came across naturally. And so everything that Linda said, I just agree wholeheartedly. So I want to thank you. You made the different types of term insurance more understandable, and to where you could convert things. And then also with the whole life, or the universal whole life, becoming your own bank. You just laid it out beautiful. I recommend also that you take this and use it to its fullest advantage. Thank you. I almost didn't make it on here this morning. I am glad I did. Thank you, Jeff. I appreciate you. Thank you, Linda. I appreciate you.
Thank you, Dr. Jim.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much, Dr. Jim. Anyone else have any questions, comments, anything before we go? All right, wealthenergetics.money. You may have questions and you just don't want to ask them publicly, and that's okay. But don't just sit back. So your family could be forever set up just by this information, and it's not as complicated as you think. Talk to Jeff. He will help you. He'll find the best plan for you and your family. Maybe you need to do a Zoom for your family. He'll curtail a beautiful, just like this, like this, and share it with you and your family, and you guys can ask questions, because maybe you need a smaller environment to do that than Longevity, which is hundreds of thousands of people. But you can go to, I would challenge and encourage you, go to Linda Making a Difference Tyler on Facebook. You can just share this link, send it to some of your family members, because it was just really well done. I'm going to go and trim the video a little bit, take off all the front front half stuff so that when you share it with people, it's all ready to go. So, Jeff, well done, sir.
Thank you.
You always do a great job, but this was just, you were, I can't even explain it. Your passion, your intonation, your clarity of the subject matter was stellar. Just well done.
Thank you.
If I were you, go back and listen to that and just repeat that over and over and over again. Not just for us, but I'm saying because this can be a very complex subject, and a lot of people think that it's about, I just, it's about dying. I mean, I thought that. I told you, and I was like, oh my God, when I saw that this was about something so much greater, which they keep those secrets, especially, I will say, from people of color, because they do that, they say, hey, if you ever want to, hide information, just put it in a book. And so we were never really subject to that. I've never even heard that until I was at a seminar, and I was blown away. And I was like, oh my God, I got to get my insurance license. And I should have kept it, and I didn't. So, now I just refer people to Jeff because I know that he's going to take excellent care of you. He's going to move at your pace and make sure you get everything that you need. So just exceptionally done. I mean, I don't even know what else to say. It was amazing. Thank you so very much. I'm going to unmute the Zoom. Please, everyone, please give it up for the amazing, the phenomenal, the greatest wealth strategist on the planet, Jeff Kamke. Have a great day, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Linda.
Have a great day, Linda.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Well done.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jeff.
so
Thank you,
much.
Linda. Thank you, Tony.
That was amazing.
Thank you,
Thank you
CJ.
so much.
Thank you
Yes,
all.
thank you. Thank you, Herb. Good to see you. Thank you, CJ, Tony B, Dr. Jim, Auntie Pat, Terrence,
Thank you.
Heather, Queen Mary, Douglas, Reggie,
Thank you,
Jackie.
Linda.
Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
You all are incredible. Have a blessed day. Thank you so very
You
much.
too.
Thank you so much,
Peace.
Jeff. Hey, Tony B, CJ.
Okay, great.